What's going on, guys? Anime Okage back at it again, and today we're going to be talking about My Hero Academia Chapter 420. Nice. But anyways, this chapter begins with Aizawa and Present Mike on a small, tiny island with, you guessed it, their best buddy, or best buddy that they used to have, Shirakumo, aka Kurogiri. If you're not aware of who Kurogiri is, maybe you shouldn't be looking this far ahead in spoilers, but Kurogiri used to be on the side of the villains, still is, but he's very brainwashed. It is actually the corpse of Shirakumo, who had a cloud quirk back in the day, and he was best friends with Present Mike and Aizawa, and they were going to form a agency all together and be friends forever and fulfill this dream. But Shirakumo, by the timeline of the Vigilantes manga, had an accident. And when that accident happened on the way to the hospital or after he got to the hospital and was pronounced dead, All For One took his body in order to warp it and combine it with another quirk in order to make the warp gates. Later on, when Present Mike and Aizawa found out that this was the corpse and body of their old friend Shirakumo, they became very, very passionate in trying to get their friend back. I mean, who wouldn't? It's your childhood best friend that you have found out is still kind of alive somehow. Like, he may still be in there, which we're finding out that he is. We already knew that he was by, I believe, the last episode of the last season of My Hero Academia, that he was still in there to an extent. But now we're going to find out that he is actually in there a lot more than we would have thought, or they can at least reach out to who Shirakumo was. Present Mike is holding Shirakumo, or Kurogiri, by the shirt, and he is yelling at him, teary-eyed, saying that Shirakumo's body should have never been desecrated like this. And he punches Kurogiri, or Shirakumo. I don't know why he's mad at Kurogiri or Shirakumo. I understand he's just mad in general, but this isn't who you should be taking it out on, because this person, even if he was mad at Kurogiri had no idea who he was before. Absolutely no idea until all these progressions happened and he was able to see past life by old friends coming in and trying to reawaken old memories. Kurogiri is actually the first Nomu that All For One ever made, and it's possibly one of the most perfect Nomu he's ever made. It has a consciousness, it can take orders perfectly, it can have dialect like speech back and forth, and no one would ever guess that it's a Nomu. So, when Kurogiri starts crying, starts having tears fall from his eyes, we're just as surprised as Present Mike and Aizawa. Present Mike chalks it up to, it's raining outside, it's not his tears, he can't cry, he's a Nomu. But we see tears flowing from what once was Shirakumo's face, within the warp gate kind of thing. And in the last season of My Hero Academia, we actually saw that Aizawa and Mike, like I said, were able to break through to Shirakumo within Tartarus while he was locked up and he was having his quirk suppressed by the quirk suppressing drugs they give him so the prisoners can't break out and just use their quirks whenever they want to. He says, you shouldn't get all hopeful of a miracle like we had in Tartarus. We're 30 years old now. It isn't like we're second years back at UA. Aizawa then states again that Shirakumo died whenever they were kids. But there must be a reason why the Kurogiri they know of today saved Present Mike and Aizawa whenever they were in peril. As you know, if you've been following the story, you know that Kurogiri can increase his size or the mist that's around his core body. And this mist begins to increase around his core body. And as it's increasing and growing bigger, it says Yamada. And Present Mike, hearing his name, just starts to cry even more and really just break the tough guy persona and break down because he's getting glimpses of his old friend that he wishes he could have back. The entire reason that Mike is being this emotional is because he's being reminded of his best friend in the past, and he is getting this little glimmer of hope that he could possibly get his friend back. And I could see where he would be mad at the fact of, how dare you give me this hope? It's cool to see. In the same page, we cut back over to Tsukauchi, and Aizawa is contacting him back at HQ control room of this operation, fighting in the war against the villains. And he asks if him and Monoma are okay to fight still. And if you don't remember, Monoma with his copy quirk since Aizawa can't fully utilize his erasure quirk anymore, was holding on to Aizawa and effectively using his quirk in constant contact with Aizawa so he would never lose the quirk, and was erasing Shigaraki's quirk while he was fighting against Deku to give Deku and the heroes the upper hand in that battle. Without Monama's help doing this, that battle would have been over far, far sooner than the story is continuing to go on. He had a plethora of amazing, strong as can be quirks. I mean, enough to fight against Star and Stripes, and completely low differ. I know that she did a lot of damage to him, but in the end, it really wasn't that hard for him to defeat her. If she would have known his true relation with his inner self and wouldn't have had like personalities, like disorder of who's really in control of the body at that moment and what's his real name and everything, she would have won. But it was just incredible to see him utilize all those quirks at one time and utilize his like buffed up body and overpower her essentially. Think about it. Star and Stripe can bend reality, and Shigaraki can decay things with his hands, and he can really just use a lot of very good but regular quirks that are at his arsenal because of All for One. He can't bend reality like she could. By the way, I cannot wait until that particular fight gets animated because, dude, it's gonna be crazy. In the next page, Tsukauchi confirms that Monoma can't fight because Monoma is still unconscious from battle that they had earlier with Shigaraki. Aizawa asks Tsukauchi, well, how many can fight? And it shows Aizawa immediately show up at the underground shelter facility where all the heroes are like saving people and the heroes are waiting in the barracks. He actually shows up and starts talking to Ectoplasm, which we saw earlier. Ectoplasm is with Eri. So Aizawa has just traveled a very far distance in a very, very, very short amount of time. 1 page to be exact. And we find out it's because Kurogiri is now allowing the heroes to use his Warp Gate quirk. Or not allowing them to use, he's helping them by using it. They're not using it themselves. He's essentially helping out the heroes joining their side. He tells everybody he does not know how long Kurogiri's Warp Gates will work or will work for them, because we have to remember that there are 2 personalities within Kurogiri. There's the original Shirakumo, which is on the hero side, and Aizawa and Mike's friend. And there's also Kurogiri, who was made for the only purpose of protecting Shigaraki. That's it. If it has to do with protecting Shigaraki, that's Kurogiri's main goal. And this definitely is not protecting Shigaraki by helping out the heroes to go and attack the body of which is Shigaraki's. So at any point in time, the Kurogiri personality could take back over and could effectively ruin all their plans of being able to get as many heroes to the war and to the exact fighting area as possible. It could completely ruin their plans of getting as many heroes. And so effectively, if Kurogiri comes back and has that thought of, I'm a villain, I don't work for the heroes, he could completely destroy the entire plan of getting as many heroes to the fighting area as soon as possible. Among the heroes that volunteer to go fight in the war because they know they're being called to arms, even though it looks like an impossible battle, is Death Arms. And Death Arms, he was one of our first heroes that we ever got introduced to. And we found out way later after the Dark Deku arc that he actually retired because heroes were being shamed so much, and he had so much shame on his mind from what was going on. He just said, it's time to hang up my cape, even though he didn't wear a cape. He said it's time to hang it up. But along with him, we see Astro from Barrage, and apparently Barrage is Horikoshi's first work before My Hero Academia. It's really cool to see him add in his past works, even though a lot of people might not know it. I have no idea what Barrage is or what Astro's abilities were or what his role was in there, but it's cool to see his old works pop up because you can do it in scenes like this where there are so many random heroes that none of us would know. You could make this one stand out, and it's cool to see him having that kind of nod to where he started when it comes to the end of his magnum opus. And when I say magnum opus, I mean magnum opus thus far. Horikoshi could go on from this in make incredible things. But as of right now, with the popularity of the world, even though it's fallen off a little bit, you can't say that My Hero Academia did not leave a lasting impression within the anime community. Even though some may not be good impressions, there are many, many impressions, and he will leave his mark on the anime community for all of time, I believe. We see some kid give his shirt to Aizawa, take the shirt off his own back and give it to Aizawa to give to Deku for some reason. I saw a lot of people saying that this was some kid that was like against Deku or had some significance earlier in the story. I don't quite remember where this was, so if you do know, throw it down in the comments because I am at a loss. I'm at a loss, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I watch this stuff and read this stuff all the time, but for some reason, this just isn't clicking. I don't know who he is or when he was in the story. If you know, leave a comment. In page 8, we cut back to an old fight that one of the side villains was having that was preoccupying the heroes of Class 1A. We see Sero, Sato, and 13 other heroes that are all caught up in this villain, Gashly, his quirk. Again, I'm not 100% what it was before, but I know it was giving him trouble. I know they weren't having a good time. I keep doing the sketch finger.
What's up, brother?
I know they weren't having a good time, brother. They weren't having a good time. But it's cool to see that we're actually getting some follow-up or resolution in what these fights were, because for the longest time, don't get me wrong, I'm glad that we cut back over to Deku and Shigaraki, but I do want to see the rest of Class 1A. They all have very good, flushed out quirks, and I love to see what Horikoshi does with each one of them. And I'm one of the people that is on the side that Class 1A did not get their proper time to shine. And we'll see later on this chapter that that time very well be right now. But throughout this entire story, they have really been put on the bench. And I hate that. I hate that because I know Deku is the main character. I know that Bakugo is right behind him as the secondary protagonist. But it just, man, all these other quirks and abilities had me so excited whenever I very first started My Hero Academia years and years ago. It had me so excited, and I just never got the payoff of seeing what they could do or their peaks. I hope that we get to see it now. I really do. But on the next page, we see several heroes show up to aid in that fight and help out the heroes that were being trapped within this villain's quirk. And we see Aizawa along with a few other heroes that are helping to break it up and save those heroes so that they can recruit them to be in the main fighting force at the main stage of the war, which is Deku and Shigaraki's fight. And I know I didn't do a review for the last chapter, but if you guys are caught up with what was happening, Shigaraki within his own body is pretty much no more. I'm sure there's some part in there that we're going to find out is in there still, but we had a resurgence from All for One within Shigaraki's body. And once all the One for All quirks were transferred forcibly onto Shigaraki, that kind of broke the consciousness that was holding All for One from being able to emerge. Because one of the main things that he wanted from Shigaraki was an incredible willpower. And that willpower actually became his own detriment, because he was not able to break through Shigaraki's willpower and consciousness when he wanted to take over the body initially. Forcibly passing on all the One for All quirks broke Shigaraki's willpower and his mental state enough to where One for All could could take over Shigaraki's body and forcibly get the vessel that he was procuring for all these years. And we've seen that All for One's main goal was to take this body one day. It was never to raise up a hero and a villain in his stead. It was always to take this body, and he started from whenever Shigaraki or Tomura was a baby. He is the one that planted the seed, not literally, he's the one that planted the seed for Shigaraki to be born. Because anyone else that he was going to take over, they were already too far in their lives. They already didn't have enough influence. They're becoming their own person from the very beginning. All for One was shaping Shigaraki or Tomura in order to become the perfect vessel, to have the perfect amount of hate, and to have the perfect amount of willpower in order to steal one for all for himself. Because that was the main thing that he lacked, was an iron willpower in order to overpower the vestiges of one for all. And since I didn't do a chapter review last week on My Hero Academia, I'll go ahead and catch you up to how Shigaraki got his quirk. We saw that All For One stole Shigaraki's quirk whenever he was a baby, or Tenko's quirk whenever he was a baby. We don't know what that quirk was, but we did see that whenever All For One initially walked Tenko home that day, whenever Tenko got lost, the night that his quirk awakened, we all assumed it was All For One. That was never a secret. It was very evident from the first time we ever saw that scene. But we didn't know what quirk that he gave Tenko at that time. And I'm sorry I keep saying Tenko, Shigaraki, Tomura. These are all the same person. And you should know that by now. But for anyone new, it's the same person. I'm sorry I keep switching. Super past tense, it's going to be Tenko. I'll make that clear. Tenko's Decay quirk manifested that evening. It manifested that evening, and that's whenever Havoc completely reached through his home and he killed all his family, destroyed his home, killed the family dog.
Our pets' heads are falling off!
We found out Decay was never truly its own original quirk. All For One had an orphanage of children that he was testing as vessels in order to become his new vessel. And he was trying to shape people from a very young age. And this is where he had the realization that it couldn't be a child that already had things in its life or memories, teachings, anything like that. It had to be a baby that he raised from the very beginning, either subconsciously or subliminally raised. He had to bring them, it had to be hatred instilled from whenever they were a child. One of the people in his orphanage was none other than Overhaul. And it is stated that Ujiko took the quirk from a child, and one that could disintegrate and reconstruct anything. I don't know if this sounds familiar to you, but that's what Overhaul could do. They took that quirk and made a copy and gave it to Shigaraki, but the thing that they left out of it was the reconstruction portion of that quirk. So what you're left with is Decay. All it can do is break down things. And I don't know if the reconstruction part of this quirk will be something that comes back, because Overhaul has lost his ability and his quirk. He can't do it anymore. He has no arms. He can't touch anything with his hands anymore. Because I believe he had to have at least one finger touch something in order to activate his Overhaul quirk. This is now Shigaraki's quirk, at least half of it. So I don't know if it's completely deleted or just suppressed, and the true awakening of his quirk will be the full-on Overhaul quirk, because no one can deny that Overhaul had arguably one of the best quirks in all of this series. It was so overpowered. He could heal anybody, he could destroy anybody, he can modify anybody, he can modify anything. It was an incredible quirk, and I still consider an ass pull that Deku was able to beat him. But now that it's gone from one person, it could reemerge in another. And I don't know if this is something like Shigaraki could reconstruct himself to be Tenko again or restart. Kind of like we all thought that Eri could rewind Shigaraki to be Tenko again, to kind of lose all the evil and bad that he ever had in his life and a fresh start. Because he didn't get to have a regular life. So seeing him grow up again and become possibly the hero that he was supposed to be, or even just a regular person and not a villain, I feel like that would be very fulfilling. I don't think I would be mad at that ending. I think that would be good. But I don't know if that's something that he can do himself with his reconstruct quirk, if that ever awakens as the second part of his quirk that he's been using this entire time, Decay. I really went on a rant there, but I'm going to get right back to it. I'm sorry. Page 10, we cut back to present day, or present time, whenever Aizawa, Sato, Sero, and Ojiro show up on the field to save Deku. And we see that Aizawa is noticing Deku's arms gone. What happened to those? He asks how long has his arms been gone, and he says, I don't know, because they were taken away from me in pocket dimension mental state thing. So really, there was no telling time in there or how long any one of them were in there. It could have been hours, it could have been minutes, it could have been seconds. There's no telling. Deku goes on to tell Aizawa back at UA he could still feel Tenko in there rebelling against All for One, or Shigaraki, he says, rebelling against All for One, but now he can't feel that anymore. He can sense that All for One has completely taken over Shigaraki's body, and he can't sense a trace of Shigaraki that was calling out for help within this body now. This is no longer Shigaraki's body. This is the vessel of All for One. So even though we just cut back to present day, we go back to another flashback in the next page where it shows Eri handing her horn over to Aizawa. And I don't know what I think about this. Did we really expect Deku's arms to be gone from here on out? Come on. In My Hero Academia, the main character, you expected his arms to just be gone from now? No way. But I don't know how they know that her quirk can work without being connected to her body. So she says that she cut off her horn to help Deku. This is very experimental. I'd have to say very, very experimental, because there's no telling if this quirk will work without being connected to her body. I know that all of her ability is stored up in her horn, but who's to say that her brain doesn't enact when to begin the quirk? All comes from the horn. Anywho, she gives her horn to Aizawa and she says, even though I can't be there, I still want my horn to get there to help Deku. Aizawa immediately asks, how did you do this? Because Eri is a little girl and little child, and obviously can't just cut off her own horn. I mean, she's strong to run a hacksaw through it. But she says that ectoplasm helped her, and ectoplasm immediately apologizes and said, I tried to stop her, but she takes a lot after you, Aizawa. Which we know Aizawa is one to cut off his own leg immediately whenever he thinks that that quirk factor destroying bullet was going to erase his eraser head quirk. So he is not one to shy away from self-mutilation if it means the betterment and the keeping your strength in the fight. He's willing to forego things of himself if it's able to give them the upper hand in the fight still. So Aizawa takes the fragment of Eri's horn and he sticks it into Deku's neck and begins the rewind healing process. And Ectoplasm says since she didn't have a lot of power stored up in that horn yet, that is probably going to take about 2 to 3 minutes in order for him to fully heal. But we see here that in this same page that Deku's arms are very much back. I can still see some bone and stuff like that, but they're pretty well back. It's not like little tiny nubs started or he just began forming bone. He's almost got a full right hand and his left hand is the only one that still has bone on it and everything. So I don't know how much time passed between these couple of panels, but I don't think it was 2 to 3 minutes. I feel like 2 to 3 minutes is a very long time in manga or anime. And we see as Deku's arms are regenerating and coming back, he's looking back in shock because behind him is another Kurogiri warp gate. And a lot of other 1A students are coming through the warp gate. We have Shoji, Denki, Momo, Mineta. We even have Koda. We have him popping through. It's hard to recognize him with like new look that he has going on, those horns. But they are coming through the gate and they say, we're absolutely exhausted from our fights. But knowing that you are trudging forward and you are fighting this war on everyone's behalf, our bodies are moving on their own. And that's the end of the chapter. We actually have a break next week. I really like this chapter. I feel like a lot of people are not going to give this chapter the time of day. They're going to say they did not like it. I know there's a lot of things that they're going to say don't make sense, like the Eri horn thing. And, we don't like the heroes getting this big of an upper hand of warp gates and being able to get them all there. It's kind of like Avengers Endgame, whenever all the heroes showed up at once to have the big giant war and battle. Having them all show up does not mean they win. It does not mean they win by any means. It does mean, however, that the tides are turning in their favor a little bit. They are still facing off against All for One, and they're still facing off against the genetically engineered and modified body of Shigaraki. And even though he doesn't have his decay quirk anymore, he still has unmeasurable strength, regeneration. He still has tons of other quirks at his arsenal that they're really going to have a hard time with it. And also, now they're dealing with the battle history and experience of All For One in Shigaraki's body. Remember, All For One, just a number of chapters ago, blew through all of these heroes with his body that was rewinding at a constant pace and was even accelerated the more he used his quirks. So he had an incentive to not use his quirks. Now he's unbound. He didn't have the decay quirk before. He didn't have a lot of these advantages that he now has in Shigaraki's body. So we're going to see what happens, but we'll have to wait for that another week, 2 weeks, because we have a break week next week. But what did you guys think of the chapter? What did you like? What didn't you like? Did you hate it? Did you love it? And what do you want to see next week? I want to try and get some predictions going in the comment section to see what we can come up with. But thank you guys for dropping in. Every like, comment, and subscribe is so greatly appreciated. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to keep trying to be more consistent for you. And hopefully we can make this into a regular thing every single week with all these different manga and all the great, amazing chapters that are coming out. Right now we're running into a lot of endgame on a lot of these mangas, and it's just got excitement rolling. So thank you guys very much. I'm Anime Okage. See you later.